Not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice. Not the game. We talking about practice, man.
3,000 pounds, Mexican with the trailers in town. I was getting money then and I'm getting money now.
Yeah, I just find that I understand why people make the jokes and whatnot. If it's a defense mechanism or they're just jerks, I don't really know. I don't really think that much about it when people give me a hard time, but I just feel like saying to them, like, you realize that you're making fun of the reason why, like, I'm alive right now. You know what I mean? Like, you're making fun of my life's purpose right now. You're making fun of, like, the most important value that I hold. But obviously I can't say that because that's just next level, right? They're just kind of taking a jab at me, and I can't just, like, get philosophical and tell them all these deep revealing things about myself. But, like, that's what it feels like sometimes. I'm like, listen, man, like, this is my life's purpose, and you're making fun of it right now. You know, I'm not even allowed to talk about it too much because then I'm living up to that stereotype where, I found the vegan's talking about veganism again. It's like, yeah, I want to talk about it because this is my life now. Why would I not?
Not a game, not a game, not a game.
I was just going to say, I find that, you know, my Christian background, I think it really did stunt my, it's going to sound so cliche, my vegan journey. I feel like I would have gone vegan so much sooner because, like, you know, there'd be people in the church and, you know, they're lovely and whatnot, but, you know, they just did not care about animals.
Right.
They're just like, they just flat out say, yeah, I don't care about animals. And, you know, I've always been like a natural animal lover as a small girl and whatnot. So I found that a bit shocking that they would say that, but I was like, oh, you know, like, apparently we're not supposed to care about animals now. Interesting. So, you know, like, I am grateful. I learned a lot about my own self, and, you know, there's good lessons in the Bible, like humility and loving people and whatnot. So I do appreciate that. But in other ways, it really did, like I said, stunt my vegan journey. So I don't know. Kind of disappointed about that.
For me too. I mean, that's kind of a big topic, but, you know, my own upbringing, I really had a great respect for tradition and traditionalism, which is obviously not Christian in my case. That included, like, First Nations, you know, to a sense. But, you know, I had this sense that, and my parents did not teach me this, that, you know, the way our grandparents and our ancestors lived was something very important. And that people in our time, by contrast, were really decadent and lazy. And that, you know, the real life that's suitable for human beings was something that disappeared centuries ago. That's just that's a childish attitude of mine. It's not a philosophical attitude I'm proud of. That's not even a teenage attitude. But, you know, so for me, that really did, as you said, slowed down, you know, my progression towards veganism. Just, you know, a respect for something like leather gloves. You know, I know that may sound ridiculous, but if you've seen how leather gloves were made in medieval Europe and this kind of struggle human beings have had for centuries to protect themselves against the cold, it may sound meaningless, and it is meaningless, but that wasn't meaningless to me, you know. So that sense of wanting to value tradition, even without religion being attached to it, that definitely slowed down my progression towards, you know, first vegetarianism and then veganism. I didn't want to think that thousands of years of our culture and civilization, of anyone's culture, not even my culture, all culture, like Chinese culture, like the whole world's culture, I didn't want to think that had all been an error and would all be, you know, discarded now. I wanted to have more traditional values or more traditional approach to life.
But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice?
I see people here on YouTube in the West relating veganism to a lot of I don't know, how do I phrase it? I guess a lot of pseudoscience, quite frankly, and just a lot of, like, I guess, like, hippie stuff.
Yep.
So I find that so counterproductive. You know, we're trying to get people, so we're trying to get people now on board with super meat, right? Like, this is the answer and whatnot. But meanwhile, this whole time, for all these years, we've had these vegans being anti-GMO, anything kind of remotely unnatural. And now they're changing their tune and they're trying to get everyone on board with this completely unnatural super meat. But you've been contributing to this climate of, like, anti-anything unnatural. So, right, it's just like, well, great. Like, now you've convinced all these people that anything unnatural is bad. And if this were to work, theoretically, the super meat, well, who's following you is actually gonna want to eat it after you've been telling them after all this time that unnatural stuff is bad.
Right. I think though the thing to remember is they're not the same people, right? I mean, what you've just alluded to the contrast between the people who are kind of the hippies, who are anti-science, and have this very entrenched notion of doing what's natural, the so-called crunchy mom stereotype, the people who refuse to let their babies be vaccinated, etc. Those people still exist, and I think they haven't changed. It's just that they were really the early adopters of veganism in this period, and then over the 10 years after that, you get different types of people joining in. So I think that's the contrast. I think that chorus, a lot of those people were former members of Hindu cults. Sorry, I'm not anti-Hindu, but I'm just being blunt about it. And that's why within the raw food movement, I don't know if you've seen the specific claim that if you practice the raw food diet, your sex drive will dry up and disappear. You'll lose your desires for worldly things, including sex. To me, that's a very interesting contrast to, as you know, many other vegans, including PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They had some really crass ads.
A painful condition that occurs when boyfriends go vegan and can suddenly bring it like a tantric porn star. For Jessica, it's too late.
Oh, you're back. You feeling better?
They're having more sexual desire, an aspect of it. Now, I think probably both of those claims are a bit pseudoscientific. If you already have totally normal positive sexual function, I don't know how much improvement you're going to get. They're making claims based on, if you're a heart patient, if you have high cholesterol levels, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, that contrast to me indicates that the people who came out of a yoga background, out of some kind of westernized Hindu background, they were bringing into veganism these spiritual beliefs that by having a pure diet, you are purifying yourself spiritually as well as physically. And that things like your desire for money and sex would disappear because you're eating watermelon every day or whatever, But I just say those people are still there, and, they stopped coming to my channel a long time ago. I'm comfortable with that, That's what happens on YouTube. At first, you get kind of random viewers and random hate mail, and then with time, you'll go through it too. And then with time, people figure out who you are and what you're about, and so those people keep coming back and they tell their friends, and you start getting people. You find your audience finds you. That kind of thing happens. Mm-hmm. But I don't think veganism has changed. I just think it's gotten more diverse.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing, I suppose. More diversity. We want everyone to go vegan. I'm just thinking of like popular YouTubers, like Happy Healthy Vegan, right. That Vegan Couple. Right. Like they promote like a very, very much so like natural, organic kind of lifestyle. Right. So they actually just put out a video, Happy Healthy Vegan. I didn't watch it I should have, but they put out a video about their feelings on like lab meat and if they support it. Right. But I suspect that they do. Right. I didn't even watch the videos. I can't say. Right. I should have. But if they were to support it after all this time, saying how they're anti-science, I don't know. Could they really?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Look. The thing is,
I just thought that was.
I spend most of my time giving morality lectures on YouTube, which is, I'm a member of a small percentage of the population who does that. But, my views on morality, although they may seem very trenchant, I do genuinely appreciate that different people are capable of different things. Different people have different things to offer. So I myself have never slept with a prostitute. I have actually done research on prostitution in Southeast Asia, several different stages of my life, as political science, social research. However, I've mentioned this somewhere on the internet before. Among the incidents that really shocked me and changed my perception of that was meeting a man who had a bullet wound in the middle of his face from the Cambodian Wars, to put it that way. And for him, his only contact with the opposite sex was, going to brothels. Now, in that culture, well, I'll say specifically about Laos and northern Thailand, some disabilities that we consider relatively minor, when we have a disability called having a hair lip, where a person has a permanent scar there from a reconstructive surgery when they were an infant. It's a fairly common disability in both East and West. In that culture, if you're born with that, basically no woman will ever touch you aside from a prostitute. It's regarded as hideous, with that culture. We have at least the guy Joaquin Phoenix, I think is his name, one of our famous actors. He's considered handsome, and he has this disability. He has a hair lip. So I just mentioned some things that are considered ugly or hideous or what have you. So I, having lived in that culture for a while, I became more tolerant of prostitution when I met people, frankly, of both genders, where you realized within that society, that's the only love in their lives. And again, I'm not them, they're not me. I may disapprove, but I have a real sort of tolerance for that. Whether it's lab-grown meat or many of these other things, the fact that I don't do it, doesn't mean that I think it should be illegal. Doesn't mean I think nobody should do it. A lot of that stuff is gross to me. I mean, ultimately, what you're talking about with prostitution, if we're talking about consenting adults, we're not talking about child prostitution. We're not talking about anything too insidious. Ultimately, my moral objection to it is kind of based on the fact that I think it's gross. And some of the stuff we object to as vegans, some of it is a hard moral black and white issue, but some of it we're actually objecting to in that same way, where we're into a kind of gray area where this is kind of gross. There's another company doing lab-grown milk, but it's actual cow milk. It's not soy milk, but it's made in a vat in a lab. Yeah. One of my viewers alerted me to that. So it's similar to the lab-grown meat phenomenon, where in a sense it is milk and it's just as unhealthy for you as real cow milk, but no cows are harmed because they're cells created in a lab and combined. So it must be kind of ridiculous because you're adding all the unhealthy stuff. How much fat do we add to this mix? It's kind of weird. Why not make it healthier? But anyway, that's also coming along. But this stuff, I may find it disgusting. I might never do it. That's what I said in my 2-minute video. The fact that I wouldn't do it doesn't mean nobody should do it. And ultimately, again, okay, contrast Thailand to Saudi Arabia. Where would you rather go on vacation? Thailand or Saudi Arabia? Now, when I go to Thailand, I am not going there for prostitution. Literally millions of men are. However, I want to be part of a culture that has a certain kind of freedom of speech, freedom of gender equality, including freedom of sexuality, but I want to be in a certain kind of deeply democratic, deeply liberal culture that Thailand represents, and prostitution, like it or not, is part of that. And I do not want to be in a culture that is, an authoritarian, moralizing culture. I believe in Saudi Arabia there's almost zero prostitution. Maybe someone's going to write into me and say no if you know the right brothels to go to. Maybe it's the opposite. But obviously it's much more secret in a culture like that. And again, vegans, obviously, whether we're talking about the next 10 years or the next 200 years, what type of political ideology do you want to represent? I do not want to represent the Saudi Arabia of veganism. So I don't know who's going to represent the Athens of veganism or the Thailand of veganism. These are still open questions, but for sure there is a real, I call it the Catholicizing tendency in veganism. There's a tendency to make this into this kind of very strict moral straitjacket. The quest for purity, whether it comes out of that already alluded to kind of Hindu background, or whether it comes out of a purely political tendency or what have you.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, if you want true freedom, you do have to allow for. You could almost see prostitution as like a good thing in that sense, I suppose. Yeah. Like people are allowed to express themselves and whatnot. So silver linings again.
Well, right.
One way to look at it.
I mean, as with smoking too. If you admit that something's a problem, that doesn't mean you want the police to kick down people's doors and throw them in prison to solve it. So like when I was in Thailand, this is a distant memory, but as I recall, I read an economic estimate that put of Thailand's cash economy. I'll say why I specify cash economy. Of Thailand's cash economy, they had prostitution and related services as 14% of the economy. So at what point do you admit that it's a problem? Like when I say I think we need to tolerate prostitution to some extent, do I mean 10%? Do I mean at what percent? At what point is it a problem? It is a problem. It's deeply problematic to me. When I was in northern Laos, a small city in northern Laos, but it's still a city or a town. But they have electricity, they have roads, they have concrete buildings. It's not a village. It's a small city. I was in a small city there, and again, I did real research on prostitution, etc. So I knew about this kind of stuff. And they had basically a program going on there where the local wealthy men would actively recruit virgin girls from inside the local high school So this is a unique form of prostitution. So they would pay one girl to be a recruiter, to recruit girls to sell their virginity to these, I don't know if you call them businessmen, or probably some of them are army generals. I mean, probably they're the local elite. Now, I find that deeply disturbing in many, many ways, although I believe it's legal. Or, the girls in that case, I do not think were underage. God knows, in Laos, I knew about plenty of stuff, related to child prostitution, underage prostitution, and so on. At what point is it a problem? And then when you acknowledge it's a problem, what you do about it? So a lot of our discourse, I have said this on YouTube before, a lot of our discourse in the Western world is kind of hyper defensive about that first phase of admitting it's a problem. Because the assumption is you're immediately going to go to some kind of fascistic, and again, Catholicizing, frankly, Catholic reaction of saying, oh, if we admit it's a problem, that means we have to stamp it out of existence entirely. And I don't think that's the solution. But yes, does Thailand have a problem with prostitution? It does. Would Thailand be a better country if prostitution were only 5% of the cash economy instead of 14%? I think it would be. I think that would be much better. But anyway, sorry, but just to include the footnote, the issue with the cash economy is that in a country like Thailand, a lot of the economy does happen without cash trading hands. So, like a farm that gives its lentils to a factory to process it into something else. So there are parts of the economy still that are not included in that 100%. Yeah. So anyway, right. But with cigarettes, with veganism, to come back to the point, or come back to our common ground theme, at what point do you admit that, industrialized production of meat in Canada is a problem? And then once you admit it's a problem, what do you do? Even I don't suggest that, we should have the equivalent of the, SS or something, have some army go around and just immediately kick down all of the slaughterhouses. As I've pointed out in videos, we wouldn't know what to do with the cows. What do you do? Set them free? Set them free on the plains of Saskatchewan, have 1 million cows? It's not clear what kind of transition we're talking about. But that first step of just admitting this is bad, this is something where, again, I don't want alcohol to be illegal. I never drink alcohol. I drink absolutely zero. I don't want cigarettes to be illegal, but I want us all to engage in democratically and openly some kind of long-term plan about how do we reduce this? How do we contain this? Gotta be a better future.
Looking at it just seems like, do you ever just get so discouraged just looking at the landscape as it is now?
I mean, listen, we talking about practice.
I watched that and I totally agree. Like the way it's portrayed, veganism is going to make you so happy and whatnot. And it's like, how could this make you happy, seeing this carnage every time you go into the grocery store? How is that a source of happiness? I get a sense of satisfaction knowing that I'm not contributing to that and I'm going to do everything I can to prevent that. But happiness? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And I don't even know, I did briefly break down weeping in that video. Did you catch it? I actually do wipe a tear away from my eye.
No,
but
I was like doing other things listening.
Yeah. No, if you go back, the part where I describe seeing chicken feed, I actually start weeping on camera. And I kind of had a choice. It was like, okay, I'm either going to stifle this or I'm going to actually weep openly on camera. And I choke back the tears, but that's a good. So I think I'm at an average of weeping on camera once a month now. But no, Dom Bauer was one of the first guys to really talk about that. But that's how I choose to do my channel. Again, I appreciate that about your channel. The video you made talking about this guy on Facebook who posted the cow heart and so on. I really value a certain kind of emotional reality, even when your life is kind of fake, even when your life is full of weird or surreal or fake things. I really value that. And again, the kind of vulnerability you bring. It's sometimes in parts of the videos where you're not saying much. It's just obvious, it's emotion. There are parts of the video where you're just like, this was messed up, but there's a real emotion to it. And for me, so I'll just say a little bit more about the chicken feed, seeing the corpses of animals and sometimes even seeing ground beef. When I first got here, I went into so many different restaurants to see if they had just one thing that was vegan. It's not worth explaining, but it's because of the way Chinese food is made. They could just have buns that are vegan. They could just have something like that, an isolated item, not something cooked in a pot that I could buy. So I really went into a lot of meat meat-making restaurants when I first arrived here, looking for any options in the neighborhood. And but I remember I almost wept actually in one restaurant. It just brought up so many emotions and memories and all these other things. And literally looking at a small bowl of ground beef, you know, in some ways it's crazy, but it's the sense in which it's not crazy. I could break down for you what I was already thinking about before I walked into the restaurant, and the way seeing that bowl of ground beef, it just illustrated for me things I already care about and what have you. But okay, be honest with you, the thing with the chicken feet or the ground beef or anything else, it's the same as seeing human skulls. Like you probably haven't seen this, no offense, but like in Cambodia and other places, you can go and see a pile of human skulls. If you come to Thailand, I can take you there. You can become a death tourist. That's what people say about it. You can go and see mounds of human skulls. In Europe, from the Holocaust or World War II, you can see a pile of human remains. I remember one that made a lot of people weep was a pile of children's shoes. Children executed by the Nazis, where they threw the shoes in a pile after they killed the children, and it's just a pile of shoes, and people break down crying. It's not the shoes. It's not the skull. Even the skulls, the human skulls, are meaningless if you don't know about the history or care about it, if you don't have something else. If there's not something else going on in your mind. But in the same way, seeing the chicken feet, or even seeing the human attitudes towards them, with the people picking them up, and checking the quality, and this kind of thing, because that's what people do in front of you, there's a lot to it. So yeah, that's all I'd say is try to weep on camera once a month. But for me, that's
okay.
That's right. Yeah, right. If you want to imitate my YouTube success, hey, the real successful person to imitate obviously is Vegan Cheetah or something. It's not me, but depends what you want on YouTube. Anyway, do you want to come back? Do you want to talk about? I wrote down so don't forget. Do you want to talk about BC? But if you want to talk about YouTube, if you want to talk about success on YouTube, if you want to talk about anything else, we can do it. Whatever you want to talk about.
Oh man, what was I even gonna say back then?
Well, look, just to give you a brief comment though. The last time I talked to Cheetah, because we do talk, I mentioned you. He I think he watches all your videos, but he watches you regularly. But I said to him, we were talking about another female YouTuber who we both think is garbage, and we both and I said to him, I said, look, you compare this girl to Tofu Goddess. Tofu Goddess actually has something to say. You know what I mean? It's like, apart from the fact that she's good looking, like YouTube is about talking. If you have nothing to say, you can't go very far in this business. Doesn't really nothing else really matters. You can be ugly and be great on YouTube. Look at The Amazing Atheist. He's pretty hideous.
Yeah.
He remains one of the absolutely most successful people. He always has been, and I think nobody thinks he's handsome. No offense.
Yeah.
So I just say it doesn't really matter that much how you look, especially not long term. It may be why people first click on your channel. But, I just say, but Cheetah, of course, agreed. He was like, oh, yeah, no, like, Tofu Goddess, has something to say. So I just say, long term, there's only reason for optimism there. Again, I don't know if you need the compliment, but I just say everyone else has noticed what you're doing. And it'll be 2 years before you have any following. That's just normal on YouTube. Nothing happens overnight. But still, if you do put in the time and stick with it, I think, there are really meaningful rewards that come into your life through it.
Yeah, I initially came onto YouTube just because, I do have a lot of vegans in my own personal life here in London, Ontario, but I just wanted more perspective, I suppose. I'm very much so a people person. I love talking to other people. I love hearing contrasting perspectives, even if I don't necessarily agree with them. So YouTube, it just seemed like a really great medium for that. And also, I was seeing a lot of YouTubers who, quite frankly, I consider quite stupid on the vegan scene.
Yep.
It's just blatantly stupid.
Yep.
So I was like, I feel like I could contribute something, because at this point, I had never heard of your channel. I had never even seen any of the more reasonable YouTube channels. Like, they were all a lot smaller. I don't know, they seem to have gotten a lot more popular lately.
Yeah.
So I was just seeing a lack of that. My first videos, I didn't really have a direction, but I'm talking about very simple concepts because I didn't see anyone talking about these. I was like, okay, I have to, the building blocks, right? This is these are some very simple, basic concepts, and then my plan was to build from there. But then from there, I discovered your channel and other channels, and I was relieved to see that other people were just talking about something other than eating bananas, quite frankly, other than eating carbohydrates. Like, there's so much more to it than that, and I found that frustrating. But like I said, I found your channel and others, so.
Yeah, I just say, like, the couple people who knew me from YouTube and then met me face to face, one of the things they're surprised about with me, and I'm basically just telling you this so that you know something about me, but it's also something about YouTube, you may or may not find useful in your own life. But like when I met with people like Jake Eames, something I say about myself that's true is, like, a lot of people on YouTube are trying to appear more intelligent than they are, and I'm actually the opposite. Not that I'm trying to dumb down my content, but I really try to bring something very emotionally raw. And if anything, I kind of feature the stupidest side of my character. It's really not the life of the mind that I'm bringing to this. And I do, because I do have a life of the mind in terms of whatever, philosophy, politics, languages, history, whatever. But that's not what I want to share on YouTube, And a lot of people are trying to appear more intelligent than they are. But also a lot of people are trying to appear more ethical than they are. And I'm really in a time of my life where I'm actually trying to be less ethical. When I was younger, I was a very kind of puritanical, moralizing person, which, like, you can see the benefit of that on my YouTube channel because I'm very used to talking about morality. I'm very used to talking about ethical philosophy, but also just moral problems in practice. But, I was talking to another vegan about this where it was like, I actually don't want to be pure. I want to be involved in the real world and real world problems. And I really recognize that involves getting your hands dirty and making difficult compromises. Like the whole thing with me talking to scientists who actually torture animals. It's like, well, yeah, I can be pure. I can say I refuse to talk to you. Or, I was talking to ones who are vegan or semi-vegan. So they're people who are really interested in animal rights. But they literally torture animals as part of their job. They torture animals to death in a lab. They exploit animals. I want to talk to you. I want to know about how that whole field works. I want to know about the future. I want to know politically how it's possible to make a positive difference. I don't want to be pure. And that even extends to stuff like humanitarian work in Thailand or anywhere where it's like, no, I'm interested in being involved. So I just say that's a real difference between me and other people on YouTube. And again, like just a couple people like Jake Eames, when they met me, they got that and commented on it. They were like, oh, you're actually smarter than you seem to be on YouTube. It's like, no, and it's not even a compliment. They're just like, they figure out, like, again, it's not dumbing it down. You know what I mean? It's just like, no, I actually want to show you the side of me that, like, weeps because I miss my daughter, which is not that intelligent. And when I'm talking to my university professors, that's not the side they see of me, or if I'm at a business meeting or anything else, right? So, I want to show you the side of me that weeps over, seeing chicken feed or whatever. That's really actively what I'm bringing to it. So, I say that to you. I think, we make decisions, and you can change your mind. You can make a different decision. What side of your character are you bringing to the internet? Cheetah went through a whole bunch of different periods. I've seen him still recently. Just a couple months ago, he did like a 3-hour lecture on YouNow on effective activism and research connected to agriculture, to getting out to farms, and how small-scale dairy actually operates in his state. And I know people think he's a bimbo. He's good looking, and he's joking around about stuff, and he talks about what kind of bum he finds attractive in a woman, and people get offended. But like, I remember when he did that, I was streaming it, but I took a shower, I did other things, like I was busy. And at the end of it, I was looked at my watch. It was like, he just did a 3-hour continuous monologue on, like, really hard political science and ecology and how agriculture is organized. So that's also a side of his character. And in the past, he used to make some more pretentious videos showcasing that side of his character too, where he was trying to be more of a social justice warrior. And now obviously he's kind of found his niche. So, you can change your mind, you can make those decisions, what have you. But in some ways it's a luxury, right? The fact that my life is a disaster, like in terms of having a job or whatever, means that I can cry on YouTube. Nobody's going to be no, but also look, I'm 6'3", Durian Rider says I'm 6'5", but I'm not. I'm 6'3". He says I'm 6'5", but I'm 6'3", and I'm 100 kilograms. You know, that's the other difference. This is a fair while ago on my YouTube channel. I always say it's harder for women. The reality is, if people give me shit about being vegan, like at the workplace, like if I was in an office and people watch my YouTube channel and laugh at me about it or make fun of me about it, because that really happens, and it'll happen to you if it hasn't happened already. You know, the reality is that just the threat of violence, just my size or whatever, is the only thing that keeps people in line. It's pathetic, but that's 2016, right? Like that's, you know, that, you know, that's it. You know, it's so. Anyway, but I've always said I really think it is worse. It is worse for women, whether it's the bullying from your own female relatives, you know, like relatives who expect you to also baste the turkey at Christmas, to like help out with the cooking. That's real. That's real pressure, you know. Or if it's the bitch at the office, this other girl who hates you anyway for other reasons, and then the fact that you're vegan is another reason for her to hate you. You know. Women can be really nasty that way. And here, within my first few days of being here, there was one guy, an Australian guy. I didn't know. He looked like he was 50, but I'm 37. 50 isn't that much older than me. And the first 2 times he took a poke at me about veganism, that he insulted me, I just said something funny about whatever, you know. And I remember the third time he did it, it was a little bit more insulting. And I stood up. You know, this is in the dining hall here at my school, and at that time there were no young people there. Actually, it was all middle-aged people or whatever you want to say. And I remember I stood up and I said to him, "Look, you know, do you want to keep taking a poke at me? Because it's only a matter of time before I poke back." And you know, everybody in the room, you know, everyone stops eating, everyone goes silent. What do you like? This is 2016, and this is not the prison cafeteria. You know what I mean? I'm like a 37-year-old guy, as a 50-year-old guy, but that is still what it comes down to.
It's sad that we can't just like move past this.
No, but I just say this is life as a vegan for a 37-year-old intellectual. His life has been devoted to languages, history, politics, charity work. I had a long period of my life where I literally wouldn't kill a cockroach, like non-violence. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is what my life is like.
I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to lead by example. I know that. And I'm not shoving it aside, you know, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice? Not a game. We talking about practice.